Mugabe era, public perceptions on the role of the military in transition politics, Mugabe and attendant effects. This is part of a series of researches that the Zimbabwe Democracy Institute has been carrying for quite some time. And this is, I think, the last in our installments on the role of the military in the political and public affairs of the state, focusing on different facets of the political economy of the state. By political economy, using Masunungure's definition, political economy is a mode of analysis that looks at how political power and economic resources are shared and distributed in particular contexts. Simply put, political economy is the relationship between agents, structures, and institutions. So we're trying to look at the relationship between structures, agents, and institutions post-Mugabe, looking fundamentally at the role of the military in the political and public affairs of the state, the role of the military in the economy of the state, the role of the military in electoral politics, and public perceptions of that role of the military post-Mugabe. Masunungure 2020, publication by Masunungure 2020, argues that we have a tripartite coalition running the affairs of the state. And this tripartite coalition, according to Masunungure, involves the part which is ZANU. It encompasses the securocratic elements or the military. And lastly, it involves what Masunungure called the business sector or cartels. So he says that Zambia is a coalition of these three that are involved in the running of the affairs of the state. But in that argument, Masunungure says that the decisive power block in that tripartite arrangement is the security apparatus. That's by way of literature review. Note that this is the core of our research. So our research is transition politics in the post-Mugabe era, public perceptions on the role of the military in transition politics post-Mugabe, and attendant effects. In our publications, the role of the military in Zimbabwe politics is not new. There is nothing really new, but it is the extent of their pervasiveness that we are trying to locate in the. You realize that ZANU had this military wing called ZANU, and ZAPU had this military wing called ZAPU. So they were implicated during the period of the struggle and post-struggle. But it is not only ZANU that had this kind of relationship with the military, but even the Rhodesian state, actually, if you use Masunungure 2020, the Rhodesian state was also militarized. You would realize that even the Lancaster House conference, we had General Peter Walls at the talks in London. He was part of the delegation. In fact, Masunungure argues that General Peter Walls is the one who had to force the Rhodesian politician of Ian Smith and Company to be at the negotiating table because his forces were facing difficulties on the ground. So the implication of the role of the military in Zimbabwe politics is also found in colonial politics, in Rhodesian politics. So ZANU actually, when they say that we have a new dispensation, we have a colonial dispensation that is manifesting itself in how the Rhodesian military, the securocratic state under Rhodesia was operating, how it is manifesting itself. You can see the statement by Minister of National Security, where he talks about phantom security threats as a justification for the deployment of security forces against citizens. This is not new. Rhodesians were doing that. Mugabe was doing that. And currently, the current government is also doing the same. So what's the difference? What is new? What is new dispensation about that? When the security are used against citizens in ways and manner that is similar to Rhodesian politics, that is similar to Mugabe politics. So this is our research. I will allow our principal researcher, Mr. Gumbo, to go through the findings and the major arguments that we post in this report, and thereafter we will ask questions and we will finish. We want to do it at the speed of light because this is the that are involved in disrupting meetings, and to avoid disruption by these usual suspects who was running our press conference at the speed of light, so that we go to our different directions.
Thank you very much. Morning, everyone. Okay, I'll present a summary of our report. I will summarize the report. The reports are there. If anyone wants a report, a copy, you can ask from our guys there section. So I will try to summarize the report, although it is very long. I will try to be short. Right, intro. On the 15th of November 2017, an unusual coalition protesters, civic organizations, the military and politicians across the political divide assembled in the capital celebrating what is claimed to be known as a military-assisted transition. Looking at it from a distance, one would construe it as midwifery to the transition into a democratic dispensation. So many expectations and hopes were pinned on the outcome of this power transition from the former administration to the Mnangagwa administration. Now, the Zimbabwe Democratic Institute has postulated in many of its transitology literature that the military is the decisive power bloc determining the outcomes of transition politics in Zimbabwe. That is the stance that has been articulated by ZDI in many of its publications. Given the military assistance in the overthrow of former President Robert Mugabe, a real look into the role of the military in the political transition became necessary. Many politicians in the post-Mugabe government, including the current president, have on numerous occasions asserted that Zimbabwe has entered a new dispensation. They have emphasized that the new dispensation is tilted towards a democratic transition in terms of its tools of power assumption, maintenance, and retention. Therefore, ZDI conducted this study to interrogate the role of the military in transition politics in this post-Mugabe political order, given the ubiquitous role of the military in past transition politics. This was done through a survey of public perceptions on the subject, analysis of public data sets, elections and positions of the military in issues of transition. Understanding the role of the military as a central linchpin in transition politics in Zimbabwe goes a long way in informing citizen agency and democratic consolidation efforts in the country. As a way of the background to the study came at a critical juncture in Zimbabwean history when the state has been puzzled by a quadruple of dilemmas. These dilemmas are: the first dilemma is what we call the citizen government dilemma. The second is the constitutional dilemma. The third is the money dilemma, and the last is the health dilemma. And at the moment, they seem to be at their worst moment. Citizens, that is to say, the governed, have lost their fiduciary trust in the ruling elite. This has been shown through two main indicators. The first is the recurrence of popular unrest in Zimbabwe, which show that the citizens have lost their fiduciary trust in the governing elite. We had protests by doctors, almost every public or every civil servant. Doctors, we had protests by doctors, nurses, teachers, war veterans, and most importantly, secondary school children. You will tell that the citizens have lost their fiduciary trust, which is necessary for the ruling elite to govern. For the first time in the history of the state since independence from Britain, the army was used to clamp down protesters who were protesting over electoral malpractice through use of naked force on defenseless citizens, which included random firing of live bullets on the streets in the capital city. Secondly, the voting patterns of 2018 presidential election have shown a dramatic shrinkage of the popular support of the ruling party. These serve to corroborate the point that the ruled have lost the necessary trust needed by the rulers. The second dilemma is the constitutional dilemma, and I explain it this way. The constitution that was promulgated into law in 2018 has been cascaded as a powerless assembly of wishes. The military-assisted overthrow of former President Robert Mugabe had no enabling clause in the constitution. What has been known is that the constitution allows power transfer through either general elections or party secondment. Although ZANU-PF tried to follow the latter procedure, the whole process was contaminated by procedural impropriety. The constitution does not provide for the military to deploy weapons of warfare on the streets in the capital and does not allow encampment of heavily armed soldiers besides the Constitutional Court and the Parliament buildings for the President to be impeached. It doesn't allow that. So all those activities, they serve to testify that the Constitution of Zimbabwe has been showcased as an assembly of wishes without power. Secondly, the third dilemma that we have is the money dilemma. The money dilemma has also been a persistent problem alongside the challenges stated above. On one hand, there has been a cash shortage or a cash crisis since 2015 that has seen a sharp increase of queues in banks across the country. On the other hand, a terrifying hyperinflation environment has also emerged. That is a summary of the cash, of the money dilemma that we have. The last dilemma that we have as a problem in Zimbabwe is, and it is the most brutish to the citizens and economy, has been the health dilemma. Zimbabwe, like other countries, has fallen victim to the coronavirus pandemic, also referred to as COVID-19. This has resulted in a series of lockdown episodes which have seen the government defaulting into rule by decree modus operandi and use of armed military to assault citizens in the name of enforcing lockdown measures. The government of Zimbabwe has created a COVID-19 task force which has caused the worst suffering, terror and fear among citizens across communities of Zimbabwe. Citizens have been made to fear the soldiers and palliative measures than the threat posed by COVID-19 pandemic. What I'm trying to emphasize is that most people in Zimbabwe now fear palliative measures of the soldiers and the law enforcement agents than the COVID-19 itself. In some areas of the country, shops have run out of stock, while in others, prices of basic commodities have skyrocketed beyond the reach of ordinary citizens who had devaluated salaries. The military has featured in all the four dilemmas of the nation state, which speaks of idiopathy in the key drivers of the state. So, this warrants the research on the role of the military in transition, because we have seen that in the four key dilemmas of the state, we have the military there having its role of playing one or two roles. Right. The research was carried out through a mixed methods research design. A mixed methods research design is defined as it's more than simply collecting and analyzing both kinds of data. It also involves the use of both approaches in tandem so that the overall strength of the study is greater than either qualitative and quantitative research. I say this so that at least as a research institution, we set the record straight on how we collected the data, just like someone else can also repeat it, see whether he or she gets the same results. That was a definition by Criswell. It was chosen for its ability to collect diverse data and collecting diverse types of data. Collecting diverse types of data best provides an understanding of a research problem. Qualitative and quantitative research tools and techniques were alternated and sometimes used concurrently. Data were analyzed using quantitative and qualitative data studies such as SPSS and qualitative data analysis such as thematic analysis. To answer, because we raised both qualitative and quantitative questions, how many aim was not only to answer the what question, but to also answer the why question. That's why we have to ask qualitative questions to explain what we get from the graphic presentations that we have in our report. So we have to ask, go further and ask, why are you saying this? Why is A affecting B the same, the way it does, is it? So, our conceptual framework for understanding the military role in transition politics in Zimbabwe was the competitive authoritarian regimes conceptual framework. Most literature on the role of the military in transition focuses mainly on its role in two stratums of transition politics and or processes, which is one, the role of the military in coup d'etats, and two, the role of the military in electoral processes. The study identifies with the latter. The study identifies with the literature that looks at the role of the military in electoral processes. Zimbabwe has been identified by many researchers as a competitive authoritarian regime. It has been identified by Levitsky and Lukanway 2002, Diamond 2002, and ZDI 2017. Competitive authoritarian regimes are defined as political systems wherein elections as a means of power transition are conducted as a ritual procedure to legitimate the ruling elite. That is the definition of competitive authoritarian regimes from Lukanway and Levitsky 2002. They are saying that in such political systems, elections are just done as a ritual, either to get donor funding, either to get international recognition, whilst the actual and political and electoral environment does not give a free and fair play to all the parties in an election. So that is what it means to say Zimbabwe is a competitive authoritarian regime. In these political systems, elections without democracy are held as electoral management bodies. The legislature, the judiciary, and the public media are politically engineered to ensure victory for the incumbent. The argument by Levitsky and Way is that competitive authoritarian regimes engineer the legislature and the judiciary and public media to ensure victory for the incumbent. Meaning to say the judiciary acts in such a manner that defends the incumbent. The legislature is engineered in such a manner that it will not promulgate electoral laws that will disadvantage the incumbent. And the public media acts in such a manner that it becomes a spokesperson or a campaign team for the ruling elite. And the other target is the electoral management body. It is targeted and engineered in such a manner that gives the ruling elite or the incumbent a competitive advantage over the opposition parties. So if such characteristics or such political engineering appear in your state, it means there is a competitive authoritarian regime. Now, for us to be able to problematize the role of the military in Zimbabwe's transition, we had to look at previous literature that did the same. In the years of Robert Mugabe administration, two main schools of thought on the role of the military in transition politics of Zimbabwe have emerged. The first, we labeled the first as the subordinate infrastructure school of thought. And the second one, we labeled it as the supreme power block school of thought. The most popular has been the subordinate infrastructure school of thought, which comprises many researchers that have published anything on that subject in Zimbabwe. Under this school of thought, key assumptions have been postulated, and these are that the military is an effective and very powerful tool in the hands of the ruler that he uses at will to effect or block transition. There are researchers who have articulated that the ruler uses the military, that the ruler controls the military and he deploys it to pursue his or his interests. And Robert Mugabe on numerous occasions have been cited as using the military to effect his, to pursue his interests.
For those interested, you read Masimungu 2020 publication released last month, Zimbabwe's political trajectory. He has two seminar works in that book which supports his view. I also have a chapter in that book which speaks of the same. You can also read various books by Professor Milestone in his latest book on Mujuru. If you read it through, you will see what we are talking about. So, what we are doing here is supported by eminent scholars who have written extensively on that. The latest scholars to publish on that is Matsunukure 2020, Professor Milestone 2020, but also 2020, Ruan and Kachen is coming before them on the same, the role of the military transition politics.
Right. Cases such as the use of the 5th Brigade to orchestrate Operation Good Ground from early 1980s till 1987, the first Trade and Reform Program 2001, the 2004 Operation in Rampatina Restore Order, and the 2008 military, the Operation Restore Legacy, and the 2008 Operation Mavotera Papi have been cited as examples by the researchers under the Subordinate Infrastructure School of Thought. They have been cited as examples where the ruler uses the military to pursue his own interests. Then opposed to this is this school of thought is the Supreme Power Bloc School of Thought, which comprises key alternative explanations to the role of the military in transit politics. This school of thought emerged as a result of the failure of the traditional literature to give explanations to key developments in the transit politics. We realized that in traditional literature, we could not explain. We realized that in traditional literature, we could not explain why the military would turn against the ruler. Because traditional literature had schooled us that the military takes commands from the ruler. The military is subordinate to the ruler, but the 2017 events showed us that there is need for further study, for further theorization around those questions. So, two major disagreements and points of departure in this school of thought have emerged pertaining to the power relations between the president and the military and the homogeneity of the interests of these two parties in transition politics. The first point of disagreement has been that the military is not subservient to the president. It is the supreme power bloc that uses the ruling party and its president as a tool of ensuring that the will of the army is done in Zimbabwe as it is done in the barracks. As argued in Matilosa at 2016, page 95, the legitimacy of some governments moved from the will of the people to the barrel of the gun. The military became the power unto itself. This has been the case during the Mugabe administration. The Mugabe Declaration in 1975 that saw the military parachuting Robert Mugabe into leadership of the ruling party. The 1983 Gukurahundi massacres of opposition supporters and the 2008 military violence on opposition supporters and the November 2017 overthrow of Mugabe are classic examples of the military stamping its supreme authority in transition issues in Zimbabwe. Citing these instances, ZDI asserted that the military exists as the supreme power bloc that captured the ruling party ZANU-PF in 1975 through the Mugabe Declaration and uses it to rule the country and direct the course of transition politics. Right. So our argument is that if transition is to be successful or is to be realistic, it must target transition in the military. Transition in the military, because the military determines the course of transition in Zimbabwe. We might cite many examples that we lived, many cases that we lived, many lived cases, and see that the military, in many occasions, steps in to tweak the transition to a direction that it wants. Right. Our study found that in Zimbabwe, politics relies on 6 umbilical cords, which are 1, the electoral process. 2, the process of exercise of the right to media and protest. The processes involved in the exercise of the right to media and protest. 3, the judicial process. And lastly, the legislative process. Now, and the politics in the farms. Now, what I'm trying to explain is that for transition, or our transition efforts in Zimbabwe, they revolve around these 4 areas. They revolve around the electoral process. When we talk about political transition, people think about the electoral process, because that's how power can be transferred from one leader to another, one party to another, one dispensation to another. The second process has been the exercise of the right to the media and protest. People understand that for power to transition from one dispensation to another in Zimbabwe, there must be protests. There must be free media. The manner with which we use the media determines how we transition from one epoch to another. Then secondly, the judicial process also has powers to influence transition in Zimbabwe. So, from what we found, we saw that the military has a all-powerful role in all those areas that we look for in terms of transition in Zimbabwe. In these 6 centers of transition, the study found that the voice of the army is supreme. The electoral process is identified as the most recognized enabler of political transition in Zimbabwe. Findings also show that citizens have experienced a dramatic intensification of militarization, deployment of naked force, and intimidating deterrence in all the above 6 centers of transition politics. The findings show that even in media and protest, the military is deploying naked force in that area, meaning to say it is a hand in that avenue of transition. Even in the electoral process, the study found that the military is deploying serious deterrence, meaning to say it is a hand in that sphere of what? In that avenue of transition. Even if we talk about the avenue of the politics in the farm, we also found that the military has a serious role in the politics in the farms, because as the adage of the former President Mugabe, that our land is our prosperity. The politics in the farms have always determined the politics in the ballot box. The politics in the farms in the current post-Mugabe era, we have seen the command agriculture being used as an avenue to involve the military in the politics of the farms. So from there now, we argue that the politics in the farms are used to either deter prospective voters or to give incentives to prospective supporters of the ruling party. Now, on the perceptions on the role of the military in democratic transition politics, 52% of the interviewed respondents said political transition without support from the military is not possible, while 43% think that political transition without support from the military is possible. What it means is that many Zimbabweans now have lost confidence in the institutional capacity of the state to deliver a free and fair election without the support of the military. Now, 76% of the respondents stated that most citizens view the military as an enemy of political transition. 77% of Sept respondents perceived the military as prohibiting the freeness and the fairness of electoral environment. What it means is that most citizens think that they cannot act freely in Zimbabwe given the state of the current state of military, given the current history, the past history that they have concerning the military and electoral politics. So it means that most respondents perceived the electoral environment in Zimbabwe as very unfair and not free. Right? On the perceptions on the state of human rights in post-Mugabe era, 72% of sampled respondents indicated that their rights have been grossly infringed whenever the military is deployed by the Mnangagwa administration. The same survey showed that the rights that have suffered the most infringement include the freedom of assembly and protest, the freedom of expression, and media freedoms. So what it means is that most respondents, our sample, show that in Zimbabwe, citizens' rights have been violated, and the most violated rights are the freedom of expression, and the freedom and media freedom, and the freedom of assembly. On perceptions of citizens in the on effect of fear caused by post-Mugabe military deployment and policy, the study found that 62% of sample respondents have been made to fear the military, and this has deterred them from participating in public protests and resistance activities. What these findings mean is that the current deployment done by the Emerson Mnangagwa administration have a deterrence effect on prospective protesters. It has a deterring effect on prospective voters because it creates fear and endangers, and it also creates self-censorship. That's what the respondents told the researchers. When comparing the state of military civilian interaction in the Mugabe era and the post-Mugabe era, 80% of sample respondents perceive that the Mnangagwa dispensation has worsened the use of force on protesters, journalists, opposition, and citizens in general. 10% of the respondents said brutal force in the Mugabe era is still the same in the Mnangagwa dispensation. Meaning to say, some respondents, there was a division where some respondents said they think there is no change in the use of brutal force against journalists, protesters, and citizens. They say there is no change, they see no change. While many of the sampled respondents say that the Mnangagwa dispensation has increased the use of brutal force on protesters. Now, what we recommend is that human rights and democracy defenders in and outside the country should redefine the democratic transition problem in a way that identifies the military as a primary and decisive power block in transition policy of Zimbabwe. For us to be successful, for human rights, for the work of human rights defenders and the activists and democracy defenders to be successful, they have to redefine the transition problem in a manner that centers the military as a decisive power block without which transition cannot be obtained. For democratic transition to be successful, it must have support of key members of the military in Zimbabwe. A research on the homogeneity of the military and the interests thereof should be sponsored to ventilate possible exploits for coalition building. Now, another recommendation is that for democratic transition to be successful, it must have support of key players in the army. It must have support of key players in the army. We saw that in November 2017 that because there was some support, the Tina Coast faction was successful in taking transition to its favor. So it means that for democratic transition as well to be successful, it must have support in the army. Another recommendation is that human rights and democracy defenders must endeavor to internationalize the transition problem in Zimbabwe by lobbying regional and international bodies to raise the costs of continued militarization in Zimbabwe. As I said earlier on, I said that the problem or the elephant on the way of democratic transition in Zimbabwe is militarization. Now, we recommend that those interested in pushing for democratic transition must endeavor to internationalize the problem by lobbying regional and international to raise the cost of continued militarization. It must be made very costly to continue militarizing public institutions. It must be made very costly to continue militarizing the avenues of democratic transition in Zimbabwe. I think by doing so, transition because to where we want. Another recommendation is that concerted efforts should be targeted at besting the role of the military in key transition enabling processes such as the electoral environment, the process of exercising the right to protest and the media, and politics, the farms and the judiciary. What the recommendation entails that efforts are needed in targeting and exposing the role of the military in all those key democratic transition avenues that I listed. Another recommendation is that advocacy and lobby at national and international levels should seek to address militarization and exposure of brutality in these transition pressure points. This will create an enabling environment for democratic transition to occur. Now, what we mean is that if the exercise of the right to protest and media freedoms are made freer than what we have now, it means democratic transition will be easier to occur. If politics around the farms are addressed in such a manner that gives everyone the right to the farms, transition politics will be easier than what we have now. Another recommendation is that there is need for security sector reform. The security sector reform agenda should be adopted as the main agenda by both democratic transition agents to enable the military to reassert its neutral and patriotic duty to the nation. The military leaders must be made to proclaim under an oath on national television and radio stations, renouncing their affiliation to any political party, condemning such affiliations and proclaiming their readiness to support a winning candidate in elections. Lastly, the military leadership must be seen condemning and publicly opposing all acts of electoral manipulation and violence that threaten the levity of peace in the country without taking sides. This will rebuild the lost trust, neutrality, and respect in the public. I think that is the summary of our report. Anyone with questions, I am here and Doc is here to answer such questions.
My question is with regard to recommendation. How do you read the recommendation of democratic transition to successful? It is we have the support of the key members and the recommendation that you say security sector reform is necessary and should be moved forward. Because from my point of view, those are two divergent issues. In your first recommendation, you are actually saying the written support the transition, and then at the end you say they should remain for. How do you read it?
Okay, I think you misquoted me. What I was saying is that the military will be neutral when it comes to political issues. It must take sides, but it must be on the side of the nation. It must support democratic transition that is in the interest of peace and security in the nation. It must be seen to be taken the side of the ruling party or the side of the opposition.
And in terms of the rights violated, the right of you mentioned it before.
I didn't get you well.
In terms of the rights that were most violated, what is the right to your
I said the rights violated when the land is deployed.
Yes, Anna.
Do we see any progress in Zimbabwe? From what you have said, are we just seeing a continual process where the army is taken over and it's going to be like that for quite some time, forever? Because right now they've become powerful and the majority are becoming poor. So do you see any progress for the ordinary person in Zimbabwe who should change the situation? I'm not saying the regime change, but I'm saying people need to be free. People are not at liberty to express their views right now. Anything outside that, people can be arrested or anything.
I think our research speaks for itself. It's kind of a comparative study which looks at the transition politics in the post-Mugabe era. And the statistics show that 80% of the respondents say that the military has been more violent, has human rights more than they did under Mugabe's regime. That is the perception. It's a public perception on the role of the military. You must read this carefully on a public perception. A perception is not necessarily a reality. That is what the public thinks, but this perception nowadays will be backed by evidence. So it's a combination of what ought to be and what is. What is in terms of the military from November 2017, the incidents of 2017, January 2019, August 2018 show the brazen nature of military action in civil politics. And these are the incidents that guide the perception. So it shows that we are not in a democratic transition trajectory, but in fact we are under authoritarian consolidation. So we have authoritarian consolidation rather than a democratic breakthrough. So this is contrary to the public perception or government mantra that we have new dispensation or that we have a second republic. There is nothing second republic about when you revert to tradition tactics. We use them actions under tradition, including people who disappeared, nationalists who disappeared forever. These instances are found in the so-called Second Republic. So the Second Republic matter is talk without evidence. It's cheap talk, but evidence does not suggest a clear break from the Mugabe type of thing. We cannot predict whether there will be a positive change or not. But all we are saying is that based on our age, the situation doesn't point to a situation where we are moving progressively. In fact, there are arguments that it has moved from being a competitive authoritarian regime to a fascist regime, because some of the things that we witness are things we read in history books about Mussolini, about Hitler, about General, what do you call this general in Spain? General. Surely, if you find things that happened in the 1940s, happened in 2020, can you that progress? Seeing 19th century, the 20th century kind of politics in 21st century, that cannot be progress. Seeing some jobs I was talking about Chikurubi reselling a consideration game. How do you call yourself a new position when you have that kind of behavior? We have heard the state saying that they are fake abductions, people abduct them. But why are those people who abduct these people not arrested? if these people are not working with the state. So these are the things that we look at and then make judgment. Unlike Mugabe would say, no, would actually come, this does things that it refuse completely. It is not responsible for anything. It is not answerable to nobody. It's answerable to itself. So these are things that we look and then we take the information out there. But the evidence is clear that in fact, simply put, we have a ruling class without ruling ideas, where every problem of society is addressed through cohesion and consent. Whereas under Mugabe, a monetary conversion was constructed on the basis of two things: the manufacturing of consent or consent of money, production and the reproduction of ideas, and also the use of cohesion. So a German is a construction of cohesion and consent for what Althusser calls repressive state apparatus, deployment of repressive state apparatus, and the deployment of ideological state apparatus. But what we see from this report, is how it's drawing, is that there is more of the deployment of cohesion and not consent. Yes, ruling class without ruling idea. For instance, if you look at the matters in terms of ideological positions of Mugabe in this regime, you can see a break. For instance, whereas there was violence under Mugabe, but there was also concomitant production and reproduction of ideas or investment in intellectual labor. Ruling class with ruling ideas. For instance, they will do violence, they will invest the funds, but they will go out there and compose songs. One day in Zimbabwe, one day in India. That's cultural production. Who even those who oppose that will find themselves singing one day in Zimbabwe, one day in India. So they will hit you, after beating you, they will sing jungles. This is a clear distinction between this government and the Mugabe. This government has no pretense of intellectualism. There is no investment in intellectual labor. If you hear people have a quarrel over bread at the table, you will be sure that they blow the hand. So the use of violence has been the political identity of this group, but the production of ideas to run the state. For instance, you can't say there's a new dispensation when you do Smith kind of politics, when you behave similar to what Mugabe says. So Mugabe would stand at an ideological level. I'm not trying to celebrate Mugabe because Mugabe was a monster who was involved in the creation of this system. But he combined cohesion, violence, and consent, and he postured as a Pan-Africanist, as a person who represents the downtrodden. But you can see with Zanu, they even contested on the question of the land person that they are being sold out. If you look at discourses in South Africa, the candidates are taken, some young are taken, because it has no ideas. It cannot manufacture narratives. It cannot manufacture friends. So it is a ruling class without ruling ideas. And when we are ruling without ruling ideas, you concentrate more on cohesion rather than consent. But the hegemon is a combination of cohesion and consent. Consent being involved in articulation, production, reproduction of the ruling class ideas. Ruling class with the ruling ideas. And that element of ruling class ideas makes, because each time when they postulate their ideas, they hardly go without threatening violence. But you can't rule on the basis of violence and cohesion only. You need to also manufacture consent. You also need to create narratives that are sustainable, narratives that are seductive. That is the economy thing. So that's the major things that we find, that there is more cohesion, threat, subversion, lawlessness than identifiable narratives to run with. The sanction mantra is a Mugabe issue. The left person is a Mugabe issue. The new dispensation is flat, dead in the sea. Second Republic is only the press conference by Monica Mchango. But beyond Monica Mchango's press conference after cabinet, there's nothing second Republic about their behavior. You see where we're coming from. We take the last three, Gibson, Muzulu, John, and Yolas. Let's short and we close this.
Okay, thank you. You say this is one of it's a test in the last series of your application. So suppose we are looking at where it started up now. How can we predict if there is any prospect of a different transition or a different outcome which does not involve the military maybe ahead of the 2020 elections?
I believe it has suggested that the decisive power block, as Google is saying, in the Zimbabwe transition politics has always been in the military. Where ZANU has been in trouble, the military has always come in to rescue ZANU. And it did that in 2000, and in explaining how ZANU won the election in 2000, the late Professor Masipula Stone, after ZANU got 62 seats, NDC got 57 seats, and ZANU got seats. In explaining what explains this difference, Professor Masipula Stone said it was the margin of terror rather than the margin of error that led to the victory in 2000. Saying that violence, coercion was the responsible explanation for the victory of ZANU. The opposition with 58 seats and ZANU with 62 seats. So the military has always been the decisive power bloc. In 2002, on the eve of the presidential election, the military issued what was called a fatwa through the armed commander general Nawashidele. When he said the military, the office of the president is a direct jacket. And he who does not have preparation draft will not decide that the military. Monzora says that the military must undo that fatwa. He used to say that before he started his political party. Now he doesn't talk about for instance, this not to him. He used to say that the military must reform the fatwa of 2002 by General Nawash. He used to say that in the past, but during his contemporary politics, he can no longer say that because of the late years of those who. So evidence suggests that, but the clearest evidence comes in 2008. For the first time in the history of yes, Zambia's political virginity was broken in 2021 during the constitutional referendum. That is the first time when Zambia lost an election during the plebiscite in the election. But in 2002, they lost all urban councils elections. And I mean all. There was no seat that was happening in 2008, including the majority of rural district councils in 2008. And fundamentally, it lost one arm of the state in parliament. When for the first time in the history of Zimbabwe, when the first speaker of parliament in Love Momon. You understand? And for the first time, Mugabe was defeated, or Zambia president candidate was defeated in the March 29th election by Changai. And the Zimbabwe Electoral Commission delayed announcing that result by 5 weeks when it is out manufactured. And then they come up saying that Changai did not win good enough to surpass the 50 plus 1 point. And then went for any run. And in that run, the military was campaigning military fatigue for ZANU, clear without any doubt. Because ZANU lost an election. So what we are not talking is not phantom. What we are doing here is not delusion. It's evidence. And they restored Mugabe, but Sajak and AU said no. This was a book as a reading. They didn't the JNU. So the things we took here is empirical data. There is evidence undeniable. So it is very difficult. We have a serious securocratic state. In fact, Professor Masumure, in his book, the latest 2020, he talks of a tripartite coalition, which involves ZANU, the party, the military, and business cartels. They can, according to him, fight here, there, overloot, but generally, they tend to coalesce. This tripartite agreement called ZANU, military and business, or the party, state, military, business complex. Party, state, military, business complex. It's a question. So if you, for instance, you have a transition, you can't talk with one partner without talking with the whole group. I want to dismiss the ANC when they came to Zimbabwe, when they meet over to move. Those are not President Nangaba says Gune Shoto. Shoto is not our president, Makako Shibunza, Irene Matas, Neshiti. Is the president in the clear military cabal that determines the rules of the state. Not all those people in Zambia. That's why when Mugabe was removed, I did not see matches in Uzumbamaramba Fungo. I did not see matches in Zaka where I come from saying that Mugabe must go. It was the people in the opposition, civil society, misguided elements who were moving around with the army. I did not see people in Mugabe or in Zarabani. Mugabe was removed by the people. It was by the army and some overzealous elements in the opposition who hated the army, not the people. Mugabe was not removed from Raban or Jolocho or Pinga. It were you elements in cities who are overhead and overclass, who hated the army, not the army supporters. And the army was aware of its mission, and after you were used, they dumped you and they said, no, let's go, this is how we don't know you. That's what Shinamala said. But it was clearly the military was charged. Okay, come on, then.
There's one thing which I didn't really understand, especially in election in the military defense, especially when you look at 1985 phenomenon. In 1980, ZAP had 26. It had huge politics. In 1985, even after 3 years of sustained Bukhara movement, ZAP came back with 26. How did it happen?
But you must also understand the difference between post-independence, post-ZAP opposition. ZAP was not just a simple opposition. You must understand that the leader of ZAP was Ngomo. And if you talk about Ngomo, the history of Zimbabwe, you are talking about the ancestor of liberation and nationalist politics in Zimbabwe. In 1980, the most senior nationalist, when all these people ZAP came from Ngomo, all politicians in ZAP served under Ngomo in the ANC, in the NDP, and in ZAP. Mugabe was public secretary of Ngomo. So when you're talking of an ordinary person in Ngomo, he was leader of all these people. So we're not, he was actually prevented from doing similar campaigns to the violence that was taking place against ZAP by ZANU, through ZANU militia. So Ngomo was simply a leader of material. Ngomo could easily have won elections in Mbare, in Zimbamaramba Pungwe, in Sakupa, if ZANU had not militarized state politics. If you want to see that, when you look at there's a clip on ZDC, where Ngomo died, and how people were mourning Sakupa, how people were mourning Ngomo here in Mbare, what they were saying. You could tell that this was not just a politician like this ZANU. So they were dealing with a problem who was acceptable and known nationwide. So the violence.
So in other words, violence can be applied to a certain level depending on how organized, how ingrained, how organic the opposition is.
You have answered yourself.
No,
but you cannot compare the opposition. Why I'm saying that you cannot compare the opposition post Ngomo to Ngomo. In fact, Ngomo was not the opposition. Zana actually was the opposite. He broke away from ZAP. Understand? Actually ran away from ZAP. So he was more than an opposition. He was a nationalist. He was a founding. These are
let's just wordplay.
what?
The wordplay, right? 1980 elections.
Yes.
We had a government which would 50 sentences. It forms a government. It goes against its coalition partners. It introduces a reign of terror. Even with that reign of terror, Nkomo goes on to get his 20% of the seats. That is the whole matter. That phenomenon we have explained in terms of that he was a big nationalist. He was a man who had the grassroots and organization. So I'm asking, is it feasible that if you have an organic organization, an opposition that is nationalistic, an opposition that runs with the sentiments of the people, they can sustain and sustain the terror even if it's physical content?
Yeah, the other issue you need to understand, the opposition here is nationalistic. That's another issue you need to understand. The nationalistic nature of the opposition is seen by its representation across the national. But you also need to understand the type of voting scheme that you made. If you were using the proportional representation, you would see where the opposition would be today. But today we use pass the ballot, which is different from what was used in 1980 and what was used in 1985. They were different voting systems. They were using first past the ballot. If you were using the proportional representation, the opposition would not have to go through 3 seats. You would appreciate. If you were using, for instance, in 2008, the 2008, Zambia has lost time in ways never seen before. But because we use the first past the ballot, where you use constitution based, which is different. So it doesn't mean that the opposition here is not nationalistic. In fact, the opposition is very nationalistic. Changra was very nationalistic because if Changra was not a nationalist, it was reckless. The amount of support Changra could have caused the destabilization of the state. Yes, the majority across the nation, you won an election and they refused him to ascend to power. In fact, in 2002, but also in 2000, in the 1980s, you remember that there was Pura in Zambia. So in terms of balance of forces, we are talking about the opposition army. In the case of Ngoro, the army that fought successfully in the liberation struggle side by side by Zambia. So we want to compare that opposition of Ngoro and the current opposition because Zambia is only the only part that is a military wing in government. So we'll be comparing two things that are a bit different.
Okay, a last retreat. So would you propose that among the electoral reforms, probably we could have to change the electoral system?
It must be in order to represent the minority groups when they vote. The South African system is working tremendously well. This one is the kind of authoritarian electoral system which must be reformed. But it will not happen that way because the state will move towards a more open society than we have now, where we have a winner takes all. You can't have a winner takes all in the kind of politics that we have done. Hey, John.
My question is on the statement made that we will that COVID-19. I understand you were saying Zimbabwe now feels more than if it's a COVID-19. I don't know if I got you right there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to find out what sort of method did you use to come up with that understanding, and then during your research, did you also look at the law?
free at the moment? Why are you always indoors? They will tell you that we are afraid of police and soldiers. Why are you wearing this mask? They will tell you that we are afraid of these soldiers out there. So, to come to a conclusion that they are not afraid of COVID-19, but they are afraid of the law enforcement agents. I think that's how we got that conclusion.
Were there any sort of percentages of those who were afraid of the soldiers and against those who were saying they were not afraid of the disease itself?
Yes. Like you said, our research uses mixed methods. We use the quantitative methods and we use the qualitative. We had a baseline for gather statistics like that in the figures. But if we go further, ask questions, the question why you are answering in this manner or you are giving. And when you start to question why, we are delving into the arena of qualitative research. So our method determines how we gather our data and how we come up with those statistics. But we do not just write these statistics as we gather them. We went further to ask to probe questions as to why they are responding, where is they responding, in order to fill the gaps, the questions that they are correct asking, and the answer in the report. When you see figures, graphs, tables in the research, they will be followed by the question why. In order not to leave holes in the question. So it's both quantitative and qualitative. It's statistical and it's inductive. Statistical that's quantitative. Interpretive that's qualitative. So we use mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative. This is for those who are in school. If you read our methodology, it's one that you can encompass if you are doing statistics. It's solid. Our methods are solid and there's literature review to guide our way of procedure. So yes, that was a good lesson come with John. If there are no other questions, I think we have come. Someone with a question, yes. Yeah, the last one.
My question is going to you think that or probably we need to clarify on the issue of the military supporting the sitting president and may not act without the orders of the president. So if I heard you have been saying we need to do some inquiries. This is true. The military might do it without the orders of the president or following their own instincts.
Okay. I think the question arises from literature review. What we say is there was a gap in traditional literature which used to explain that the military is a tool in the hands of the president. I think that's where the question comes from.
Yes.
So we raise that the contention that there is need for further research because we're seeing the military acting without the commands of the president. To say that school of thought is now questionable. Therefore, there is a need for further research into the relationship between the ruler, ruled, and military. Because it seems to me or to us that the traditional assumptions that the military is used by the president does not hold much water. But our argument is that the military uses the president in the party.
You know the adage by Zan or Mugabe about the pain in the gun. That is the pain commands the gun. But you are saying this history, particularly in November 2017, shows that the gun commands the pain. Because it removes the civilian leadership. that power led by Mugabe. So this idea that the pen commands the gun is a fallacy. It needs to be constructed in terms of recent developments in Zimbabwe, especially November 2017. The ubiquitous nature and the decisive powerful behavior of the military requires us to reflection this argument that the pen leads the gun or the pen commands the gun. In fact, as it stands, we are postulating or we are arguing through our findings that the gun commands the pen. That the civilians are puppets of the gun, or the civilians in the gun are puppets of the military. Because it is the military that is the decisive power blow. And when it is the military, through history, through the instance that has rescued ZANU-PF. ZANU-PF was rescued in 2000. ZANU-PF was rescued in 2002. And most fundamentally, ZANU-PF was rescued in 2008. When Mugabe lost both parliament and the presidency on March 29. And there is evidence. It cannot be disputed. This is the fallacy the gun. In fact, history tells us that the gun always goes to the pen. Mugabe was elected by the people in Gagao. That is the gun that elected Mugabe. In fact, the argument, in fact, it's a book that is coming by a professor that I'm not going to name. Where you are saying that when you argue that the Chimoy Congress of ZANU, when Mugabe is said to be a leader, was an extension of the ZANU Central Committee of the people. So even after Mugabe, the Central Congress that took place in Chimoy, it is argued that was an extension of the ZANU Central Committee with less than 100 delegates. How can you have a Congress of a mass political party with less than 50 delegates? It's a book that is coming. I will edit it, but I cannot disclose the name of the author because it's coming. But it's written by one of the leading professors in this country. I will thrilled to get the book. He had interviewed people during the groups of government, including Mugabe. It's a very interesting book that has been written, which shows that ZANU has always been controlled by the military since the liberation struggle. So there's nothing new about what is happening. But it's becoming more and more because ZANU-PF has lost the legitimacy of the people. So in order to maintain this rule, the head of the military is now more overt than its cause, its nature, prior to its loss of legitimacy post-2000. I think unless there are any other questions, we take these are the ones.
Okay, but can I take a little bit from what we're talking about? The development at Harvest House yesterday, and you can comment that where is opposition going? Is it completely done?
No, because it's not part of this research what is happening it generally shows all the politics of the post. Whereas during Mugabe's period, we did not see security forces getting involved in opposition politics like the first raid of Harvest when it was taken over. Even what we see with the situation where people went to an election. Tokozani Kupe contested an election as a presidential candidate. Chamisa is a presidential candidate. Tokozani Kupe the candidates. Chamisa is there. But this idea that people who voted, knowing that are voting for the FTC alliance, all of a sudden now belong to a nonsense. Mugabe was not involved in this kind of tomfoolery. So the kind of tomfoolery we say house reflects the degeneration of state politics in South, as run by the ruling elite. Yes, the adage that way the ruling class without the ruling elite. Don't do stupid things like that. That people go to an election and the citizens make their choice. And after that, you now say this choice don't matter. You people belong to a particular candidate whom these people rejected through an election, which goes to the talking about, that competitive authoritarian regimes capture all zones of contestation for power. They capture the judiciary, they capture the legislature, they capture the public media, they capture the electoral field. So when you see these things happen, you must analyze them in terms of all zones of contestation that Stephen Levis and Lucano problematized. And when they problematized this zone of contestation, Zimbabwe was also part of the data set of the investigation by Lucano and Stephen Levis. Forget the election. Coupe gets one MP. And all of a sudden, she is now doing something. That is political flood. And I don't think it's something that we engage with as academics. It's as clear as the what is behind. That's what we have is a subversion of the democratic sovereign will of the people. It's an insult. It's a provocation against the will of the people. And they know it. She got no counsel out of 20 of the opposition MPC. And all of a sudden, she's now in charge. She's now recalling us. That's nonsense. I don't think we need to seriously interrogate. These are things that are clear to everyone. That it cannot, like what Mathematicians say, that it can't, it cannot. They were fighting against that. What they are doing, it can't. But making it's awkward, actually. And they know, even if we had an election in Harare today, we could get votes, would Monzora and group get, they know it. So what they have to? In actuality, what is happening is an insult to the judiciary. The Supreme Court ruling has been used and interpreted in ways that humiliates the judges that make that decision. Because the judges never told these guys to go and record those MPs. It is not a decision of the courts. They simply, the ruling was very clear. But it was clear on the other things that they are now doing in the name of the Supreme Court. They are denigrating the Supreme Court, they are denigrating the justice system in Zimbabwe, and they are denigrating the judges who made the ruling on the question of the MPs. But it tells you the nature of the state. That is a ruling class without ruling class. I think we're done. My friend, you want us to sit here?
Are you
Okay. Can we?
But my question is in terms of the liberalization of the electoral process. Do the voters still think they have power?
That should be.
Change the scenario.
It was not part of our research questions. Do we answer that? No, that was not part of our.